This is the guidance and support film for the Year 8 assessment on Oliver Cromwell. In this you will be reintroduced to source work, how to read them, how to learn from them, how to comprehend, quote, and how to infer. So you will see that all the sources are provided on this sheet, and this video will talk you through each of the sources. You will also please notice that any keywords that we think you may have a problem with, we provide you with the definitions as well. So, question 1, based upon source A. In a word, Cromwell was a wicked man, but also had some qualities. Cromwell's cruelty in Ireland is a blot on his name. He turned out to be a worse tyrant than Charles had ever been. But Cromwell stopped a rebellion in Ireland. He defeated Scotland and Spain. He built up a big navy and attacked pirates. He will be remembered as a brave bad man. This is a quote from the Earl of Clarendon, who was a royalist. So our two key words here, royalist and tyrant, they're both down here and they're defined for you. So question 1, give 2 things you can infer from source A about Cromwell as a ruler. Now an inference is an educated guess or an assumption. So the writing frame will take you through the steps that you need to do in order to demonstrate your understanding of the skill of inference. So firstly, include a quote. Take from the text here 1 or 2 words that give you an idea as to the kind of leader that Cromwell was. Okay? This is simply comprehension. So you take some terms out of here, put them in here in quotation marks, and tell me what it means in your own words. Now, secondly, the inference. In your own words, what kind of ruler is the Earl of Clarendon saying that Cromwell was? I think Cromwell was this kind of leader because. And explain why. Now the word because in this is absolutely important because what comes after it must be your own thinking. There's no point for an inference copying text from the source because that isn't thinking, that's simply copying. Then please repeat the same thing twice. So what you're doing here is the style of a GCSE question on paper 3. Okay, question 2. Source B, a quote from Oliver Cromwell, from a book called Oliver Cromwell by John Buchan, written in 1941, so long after Cromwell was dead. The enemy retreated into the Mill Mount, a place very strong and difficult to get to. I ordered my officers to put them all to the sword, and indeed, being in the heat of action, I forbade them to spare any that carried weapons. I think that night they put to the sword about 2,000 men. So, to put to the sword, to kill them. Question 2 then. How useful are sources A and B for an inquiry into the actions of Cromwell as a leader? So what he did as a leader. So you have to do what the question is asking and constantly remember the question when you're answering. So source A tells me what about Cromwell as a leader? Describe. Quote. Use the words that are used in the sources. Now tell me why it's useful. Think about who said it, when it was said, why it was said. The word because is there for you. Anything after the word because has to be analysis. Now, instead of telling me why it's useful, tell me why it's not useful. What is it about source A that means that you wouldn't trust that source? Then repeat for source B what it tells you about him being a leader, why it's useful, and why it's not useful. So this is what we call the utility question, the usefulness question, where you have to look at a source and you have to decide why it is useful and why it's not useful to reach a conclusion. For that final question, question 2, come to a conclusion. Having weighed up why it's good and why it's bad, tell me what your opinion is at the end. Question 3. How far do you agree with the interpretation of Source C about the type of person that Cromwell was? So for this question, we only need to consider Source C. A quote from John Maidstone, Cromwell's servant, 1658. A huge soul, I think, I have only seen in this man. Cromwell lived and died close to God. He wanted the welfare of his people and he wanted peace. He was not a man of blood. He was often said in the company of officers that there might be a general massacre of all the royal family as the only way to secure government, but that Cromwell would never agree to it. How far do you agree with this interpretation about the type of person Cromwell was? Now, you've already studied Cromwell in your history lessons, and you've already studied and learnt stuff about Cromwell from sources A and B. How far do you agree with source C? So what does source C tell you about the type of person that Cromwell was? Read, comprehend, quote. What do you already know about Cromwell? Does this agree with anything you've learnt in lesson or from sources A or B? Then let's look at how much we can trust this source. The person who wrote this source is, they are linked to Cromwell because, what's their connection? They are and are not reliable because. So here you're going to repeat what you did for question 2. Why should we and why should we not trust the source? And then you come to a conclusion. Work your way through the activities on this sheet, looking at the sources, reading the sources, and using the writing frame.